Good morning, everybody. Please turn to Isaiah 9 if you are not already there. That will be our text this morning. Isaiah chapter 9. If you are wondering what the backdrop is this morning that's behind me, that is from our candlelight service that we did Wednesday, which was awesome. I appreciate everybody who pitched in on that. We had 355 people show up for that. Yeah, it was a lot of folks. And a lot of kids, and I really appreciated what all our young people did, and it was interesting who showed up. A guy that a lot of us drink coffee with on Wednesday, he just asked me, do you guys do a candlelight service? I said, as a matter of fact, we do. He drove in from Piedmont with his family. Never stepped foot in here before. Another man I can't remember who told me this story, but told me that he just drove by and saw our marquee and thought, I'm going to come. He said he'd never stepped in a Church of Christ in his entire life, and that was his first time. So it was a really cool event. I've been talking for the last few months, referencing this verse that Tim read us this morning, unto us a child is born. And I've talked about babies, how God has granted us babies, unto us a child is born, and what a blessing that is and the responsibility we have towards those babies. Last week I talked about baptisms, that God has blessed us with those spiritual newborns. They're a blessing. What responsibility do we have toward them? But really today is where I was heading. This prophecy from Isaiah 9. Unto us a child is born, and it leads us to Bethlehem. And what Lincoln read earlier, the story of Christ leaving heaven to come to earth to be born in the form of a baby, God in the flesh, Emmanuel. That's where we're going this morning. Isaiah wrote his prophecy over 700 years before Jesus was actually born. And he wrote it to a people who were in a bad spot. He wrote it to people who were facing invasion. He wrote it to people who were scared. There was fear in their hearts and fear in their whole society. And into that, God sends the prophet Isaiah to give them the good news. Somebody's coming. And that somebody is coming to help and make a difference. Isaiah 9, 6 and 7. Let's read that again. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end. On the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. What God is doing is sending the prophet with a message of hope. A lot of times the prophets had to come with bad news. You're doing wrong. You're about to suffer for it. Do right. But this is nothing but good news. God is sending someone to give hope. And just like those babies are an expression of hope to us, and those baptisms are signs of hope to us, Bethlehem, we're looking to Bethlehem this morning to find hope. This is the fulfillment. The coming of Jesus was the fulfillment of many prophecies, but this is the one we're looking at today. First of all, he says the government will be upon his shoulders. Meaning, God is sending a ruler. He's sending a king. He's sending someone to come in and set things right. In the midst of war and invasion and turbulence and fear, God is sending someone to rule and to make it right. So what kind of king are we talking about here? What kind of ruler will this be? What kind of person is God going to put in charge to make everything right? What he's talking about is Jesus. When we read these descriptors here, we're reading about Jesus. So, the first one, he calls him a wonderful counselor. Some people, there's a debate whether to put a comma after wonderful, where it might just say he is wonderful and counselor. Either way, I'm fine. Jesus is wonderful, but also his counseling is a wonder. As far as Jesus as a counselor, like all good counselors, he listens to you. Listen, when you pray, Jesus hears. And he doesn't just hear, but he perks up. He's paying attention. He's focused. He's absorbing what you're saying. And not only that, but he knows you inside and out. A lot of people, when they go to counselors today, it's easy to cover up the truth. It's easy to hide things that really need to be known. And while those things are staying hidden, the counselor can't fully help them because they're not dealing with all the facts. But Jesus, as the counselor, knows you. He knows where you've come from. He knows what has formed your character. He knows what is bothering you, what is wrong with you. And as you're pouring out your heart to Him in prayer, He listens and pays attention. And His counsel is wonderful. Now, you're going to get His counsel through His Word. As you're seeking His will and open up the Bible, He's going to direct your steps. And Jesus will never counsel you in a way that leads you astray. He's going to guide you. He's going to direct you. He's going to give you wisdom that surpasses human wisdom on every level. And as you follow Him, sometimes it's going to be scary, but it is always going to be good. Sometimes His counsel may lead you into a place that you don't think you want to go, or you think you're not ready for yet, or it's uncomfortable. Trust Him. Follow His counsel. How many people over the years have avoided disaster because they followed the counsel of Jesus? Maybe they're reading the Sermon on the Mount. They were reading about turning the other cheek. How many people have avoided worse danger or falling prey to violence or pride simply because they wouldn't indulge in rage and vengeance? Wouldn't lead them down a bad path. How many people over the years have taken Jesus' counsel on forgiveness and spared themselves from years and years of bitterness and misery? He's a wonderful counselor, but we got to listen to Him. We've got to listen to His words that bring strength and goodness and peace to our hearts. How many people over the years have escaped out of a pit or a trap because they listened to the counsel of Jesus? And it led them towards repentance and deliverance. Jesus is a wonderful counselor. Are you paying attention to His counsel? Because it doesn't matter how wonderful it is if you don't listen. Just yesterday, Blaine was asking me, my daughter, she was asking me, Dad, I'm going to bring this toy. Should I bring this toy or that toy? And I said, bring that toy. And she said, I'm bringing them both. Right? I mean, a lot of times we ask for counsel and then completely ignore it. It doesn't do you any good to have Jesus as the supernatural, all-knowing, all-wise counselor if you don't pay any attention to what He says. So, avail yourself of His counsel. Calls Him Mighty God. And I'll be honest, I think that must have thrown the people who originally heard this off. Because they were probably thinking about an earthly king who would set up an earthly kingdom. And then Isaiah throws in Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God. This ruler that is to come, that for us has already come, isn't just a person. He's not filled with human flaws. He's not going to make human mistakes. He's not going to fall prey to human sin because He is the mighty God. When the ruler comes, He comes in the power and authority of God. John phrased it this way: in the beginning in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Everything that has been made through Him and for Him. Jesus is no mere person. He's God Himself. And that means that He is above and beyond everything. All the things that we look at in our world and we get fearful of or scared of, that cause us anxiety, all of that is as nothing in His hands. Presidents, congresses, parliaments, prime ministers, kings, nations, armies, they are easily within Jesus' hands. They're not stronger than Him. They can't do anything outside of His will. Not only that, but natural events, earthquakes, tsunamis, famines, diseases, none of those are outside of or greater than Jesus' strength, because he is the mighty God. How many people over the years, how many of us have found refuge in him? And when it seemed like the world was rising against us, we drew near to the mighty God, Jesus Christ, and let him handle our problems. We stopped trying to figure it out. We stopped trying to manipulate events. We stopped trying to work out our plans, and we let Jesus in his might handle them. How many people over the years have placed their feet on solid ground because they stood with Jesus? How many people over the years refused to walk as the world walks and instead did things the way Jesus wanted and ended up delivered and saved because they trusted in him as mighty God? It doesn't do, but the mighty God, he doesn't do you any good if you're standing far away from him. It doesn't do you any good if you're following your own pathway and following your own wisdom. Trust in him. The psalmist said it like this: some trust in chariots, some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. That's a military reference. That's like saying today, some people trust in tanks, some people trust in nuclear missiles, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. Meaning, don't put your trust in human stuff. Individually, don't put your trust in your bank account. Don't put your trust in your education. Don't put your trust in your job. Put your trust in Jesus Christ, and he will come through. Everything else can fall apart because it's in the world, it's of the world. It can fail you. Don't put your faith and trust in those things. Put your trust in him, and he will not fail to come through. Everlasting Father. I think this one probably threw those people off that Isaiah was talking to as well. And I don't think this is describing Jesus in terms of the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. I don't think this is where the prophecy was going at all. Remember, he's talking about a ruler. And he's saying when this ruler comes, he's not going to act like every other dictator or potentate that you've seen before. He's not going to relate to his subjects as subjects or serfs or slaves. He's going to relate to them as a father relates to their children. Instead of using people like an earthly ruler might, instead of grinding his people down to lift himself up, he will relate to his people as a father who sacrifices for their well-being, who's not concerned with pushing down, but is far more interested in lifting up. He wants to put them in the best position by nurturing them and protecting them and looking out for their best interests at all times. Think how revolutionary that idea was when it comes to earthly rulers. That's not what they were used to. When they saw rulers, most of the time they saw somebody who was oppressing them, bleeding them dry, taking. And yet, when Jesus, this ruler, came, he came not to take, but to give. He came not to make them sacrifice us. He came to sacrifice himself to benefit us. So this ruler is totally different. Not just Father there, but look at the adjective, everlasting Father. This is a Father who will never die, who will never fade away. This ruler, his rulership shall never end. If you go into verse 7 there, it's talking about this kingdom constantly expanding and growing, and it will never end. Everlasting Father. How many people have found protection? How many people have blossomed under the care of Jesus in his nurturing and protecting and fatherly ways? How many of us are in such a better place because Jesus treated us not like subjects, but like family? It makes a huge difference in who he is. And finally, he is the Prince of Peace. Jesus is the Prince of Peace. Look, in our sin, we rejected God. When we sin, we say, God, I'd rather do it my way than your way. We rebel against him. There was hostility on one side and the other side. We chose it. We chose it because we chose our way. We chose it because it pleased us. We chose it because it was comfortable or habitual or honestly just because we're selfish. When we chose our way against God's way, it created hostility. His holiness is offended by a sinner's unholiness. And at just the right time, Jesus sent his Son to die for us. Jesus is the Prince of Peace because he made peace on the cross between humanity and God. He bridged the gap. He brought us from far away to near. And that peace has affected each and every one of us. And in Jesus Christ, we have peace with God, and that relationship turns into one of love and care. The cup of wrath is taken away, and instead we are brought in to become children. Powerful. And that peace affects us not just at the moment of our salvation, but every moment after that. We walk in peace with God. And when we're anxious, when we're fearful, we take those fears, that anxiety to him and hand things over to him, and he gives us a peace that passes all understanding. Now that only works if you're actually putting your worries in Jesus' hands. And that only works if once you put those worries in Jesus' hands, you leave them in Jesus' hands. I don't know about you guys, but I tend to take them back. I'll put them there and take them back and put them there and take them back. But when we can do that, we can lay our worries and problems at Jesus' feet, then he grants us a peace that makes no earthly sense. He grants us a peace so powerful that even when earthly circumstances look terrible and things look as if they should overwhelm us, we know that we're secure in him. And his peace helps us to walk in obedience and in holiness no matter what we see going on around us. He's the Prince of Peace. How many people whose lives have been chaotic, whose lives have been full of fear, who felt like they're out on a boat in a stormy sea, have found peace in Jesus Christ. A place where they could set their feet and trust in him. Not trusting in themselves or their own understanding, but trusting in him and letting him work things out. How many among us have found that peace? How many of us has he driven out the demons, calmed the storm, and given us rest? Unto us a child is born. Next year, 2023, I'm bringing all this up because you're going to need Jesus in one or all of these roles. Next year, you're going to have something crop up that terrifies you. Next year, you're going to have a family situation that may seem out of control. Next year, you may get bad news from a doctor that puts fear in your heart. Next year, you may lose a job. Next year, something's going to happen, and you're going to need to know Jesus Christ is the Prince of Peace. You're going to need his peace. You may discover that in the world, you can't find that peace, but in him, it's there. Remember that in 2023. Next year, you may need to know Jesus as a loving, compassionate ruler of your life. You may need to know him as everlasting Father. You may need to trust in the fact that his kingdom never ends. Next year, you're going to need Jesus as mighty God. You're going to need his strength because you may come to the end of your own. You may come to the end of being able to do things for yourself. You may come to the end of being able to rely on you, and you're really, really, really going to need to rely on Jesus. You need to know that he's strong enough to get you through, and you're going to need to know that he's caring enough to get you through. He cares about you because you are his. And he's strong enough to handle any situation in your life? Are you trusting in Him? Next year, you're going to need Jesus as a wonderful counselor. You are. You're going to need some direction. You may get off track. You may encounter a situation that you can't figure it out. You can't think your way out of or plan your way out of. And you're going to need Jesus' wonderful counsel in your life to get you through. Unto us, a child is born. To us, a son is given. And that son is the Son of God. And the Son of God loves you. And He wants to bring everything He has to bear in your life. Let Him do it. If you're holding Him at a distance, stop. If you're putting other things in between you and Him, let those things go. And let Him be wonderful counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. If anybody has any need this morning, we want to help. Please come forward while we stand and sing.